Anyway, a little bit of introduction. I'll start since Felicia isn't here. I'll start with her first. And so Felicia Marcus, actually, with all three of these Sopranos, I can say, oh, here's someone who needs no introduction, but I'll do it anyway. Felicia Marcus has led a few lives, but probably most notably in this context as the chair of California State Water Resources Control Board through the Brown administration in the drought years. And also, though, she headed EPA's Region 9, which is kind of called Pacific Southwest, which is um, kind of funny, but anyway, she did that during the Clinton administration, and she also led public works for the city of Los Angeles because I don't know they got tired of her suing them, and she also was executive vice president and chief operating officer for the Trust for Public Land, and is now and was a founder and general counsel to Heal the Bay down south. So right now, Felicia is the William C. Landreth, and I have to look up who that is, visiting fellow at Stanford University's Water in the West. And so anyway, she's restarting her computer, it looks like. Um, and here she is. All right, Felicia, just in time for us to talk about Debbie Franco, who is a senior advisor for water and rural affairs in Governor Newsom's Office of Planning and Research, AKA the think tank. Debbie works on a range of issues, including water, forests, and rural communities. And she participated in the development of SIGMA and the Drought Task Force and co-leads the Wood Utilization Work Group at the Forest Management Task Force. So prior to doing all this, Debbie served as the policy director and Environmental Justice Coalition for Water. So then that takes us to the only member of the group that has quotes in her name, Chris the Maven Austin. If you don't know who the Maven is, or at least what the Maven does most days, then I don't know, then you're not really interested in water. Um, she's been on the internet website and aggravating and writing about California water since 2007. And on Maven's notebook. And through the years, she's developed a reputation as a straight shooter, admired on all sides, of California's complex water issues, and doing so without a personal agenda, which, well, there's not too many people. So anyway, but really the main doyen of Maven's notebook, and which if you're not familiar with it, I mean, look, it's mavensnotebook.com. And actually, at some point, Chris, you should do the plug on all your adventures in funding. And but it's really a great source and a great resource. And you should have it bookmarked. It should be on your startup screen. When you get 8 slots, that's definitely worth one of them. So anyway, I hope everyone is working on their questions. Ladies, you'll tell me, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you're going to tell me when people should send their questions.
Oh, we're not going to sing.
Yeah, no singing.
Yeah, but I think they should send now, right?
Okay.
Yeah, now would be good. Let's see what's out there.
Okay, people, hit send. Let the
Chris,
waterfall fall.
Chris, you are cutting in and out a little bit, unfortunately.
You know, yeah, Spectrum decided to die on me about 10 minutes before, so I'm actually on my laptop with my cell phone video. If I turn off my camera, I'll probably do better. So I'll turn off my camera and you can see my happy business picture. Hopefully that'll be better. Spectrum still isn't come back to life.
So I only see two questions. Are there really only two people who have questions for
Oh,
us?
come on, people.
Because I'll tell you, we will entertain ourselves.
Yeah.
There's no.
Well,
Well, what about the first one about how can a soprano be a fellow?
Oh, yeah, right. Very funny.
Stanford grabs all the people when they so-called retire, but whoever retires, really. They just pop up in different places. So here's Felicia. The Friendly Fed. Or
1%
formerly
Friendly
the
Fed.
Friendly Fed.
You remember that, Felicia, the former Friendly Fed, or the friendly former Fed would be a better way to say it, I think. Yeah.
So I really like the first question. It really gets down to the part about how can water managers quickly pivot toward adaptation and mitigation measures as sea levels rise and climate change alters wildfire drought cycles while keeping environmental justice front of mind. That's a really excellent.
Ooh, chew on all
It
that.
encompasses everything.
It does.
It does. You know, the guy was talking in the previous panel, and you were asking him about innovation. And I remember going to a conference a couple years ago. It was an Israel, California conference, and David Nahai spoke. And I don't know if you know David Nahai up there, but he's done a lot of great stuff. Used to be like the general manager of LADWP, was on the water board, a really smart guy. And he actually spoke to these Israeli companies who wanted to come in and spoke about the difficulty of having something really innovative and getting a public water agency to invest in it and go for it. Because, you know, the difference between a business and a public water agency is they're very focused on the fact that they are spending the public's money. And so they just can't flip a coin on something that isn't proven. So even though they might fund a pilot study, that may not mean that they will go on to fund the whole project. So, I mean, that's I think, a barrier to innovation in public water agencies. I mean, because they're spending the public's money, and the public doesn't want to hear that someone tell them that they spent their money on an experiment. You know, so that's, to that point, that's what I will say is a barrier. I see.
I mean, I would say that I actually think the pace of technological development is quick, and there's a lot out there, but the uptake of it is very difficult. And I think that's where there's a particularly good role for the state and the federal government to sort of create the scaffolding that allows for the funding, the risk-taking, the innovation to happen. And periodically, that's happened. It happened in water in the 70s and 80s in the energy sphere. And I presided over the biggest declared failure in EPA SRF history. But it was good. It was a great failure because we didn't have to pay the loan back because they encouraged us to do a particular project. Presumably, most of their funding went to projects that actually innovated in that space. It's just the one that they wanted the city of LA to try didn't happen to be well suited to the city of LA. And we fixed it, won all kinds of awards for our sort of locally generated fix, and it caused a revolution in innovation even within our agency, but that's a longer story. I think there is a role for the federal government and the state government to step in and encourage innovation, but help fund it too, so that you take away that risk that bedevils folks at the local level if you don't happen to have a risk-taking atmosphere. But I'd also answer the question in a couple ways, and as Debbie said, I'll really be interested in her answer. I think there's just a boatload of stuff that we can do that's just thinking differently, that's not about technology and development. And I see it happening in a lot of communities around the state in terms of integrating nature-based solutions. I mean, the revolution happening on recycling is one piece of what's going on in urban California, particularly in Southern California, but not exclusively there. But the issue of stormwater capture and greening our urban spaces that, you know, LA just passed a measure, LA County, building on a measure that LA City had done about a decade ago, is now taxing itself or putting a fee, a parcel tax on, that's going to generate $300 million a year to deal with stormwater in a way that's going to encourage groundwater recharge, stormwater capture, which helps with pollution in the bay. It's going to green the most park poor area in the country. I mean, it's one of the most exciting things happening. And so leadership comes in a lot of forms, and I think people just have to decide to do it. They also did it, speaking to your question, with an equity lens. And the equity advocates were a very big part of why that measure passed. And there is writing right in the measure that requires them having a seat at the table, and they're very engaged in overseeing the implementation so that those projects, which are not just about water, they're also about quality of life in communities, the benefits are seen everywhere, and starting in those communities first, which is not the first time that's happened in LA on an issue. So there's a rich history of that, since it's one of the birthplaces of the environmental justice movement. But it's very exciting stuff, but none of it happens without local leadership. And the role, I think, of state and federal government is to help make that happen, either by removing barriers or giving a supportive push, and then regulating tactfully and tactically when it's appropriate. But Debbie, I'm curious what you have to say.
Well, so I guess what I'm going to say most directly is wake up. The reality is that if water agencies don't figure out how to change faster, the system will change you. So I mean, if you look at the opportunity set through that lens, it becomes a much stronger driver. And I think part of why we can remain sort of in why that's invisible in this space is because most water districts and water managers are focused within their jurisdictional boundaries. And it's not until you raise your head up and you look at the full functioning of your watershed that you really see these impacts right now today. I mean, 4 million acres plus of forest burned, that will have huge and long lasting impacts on much of our water supply in the state. And it happened. And we're just starting the tip of the iceberg on that kind of catastrophic change on a regular pace within our watersheds. I think personally that it's an opportunity. I think that that there are investments that are actually cheaper to make at watershed scale than if we do these investments at agency by agency scale. And I think that gives you the opportunity to incorporate environmental justice throughout the watershed, because one of the big challenges for environmental justice across the state is that we have isolated our environmental justice communities and we've told them you're on your own. But if we suddenly look up and we imagine how we're all interconnected, then the solution set becomes different. My specific example of that is we continue to struggle with how we make our environmental justice communities more water resilient to droughts. And we've decided the county should be responsible, but practically most counties in the state don't have water authority. And so great that you tell them that they should get water for their communities, but in the last drought, we had counties who no one would sell them water to haul water to these communities, which is not to say that counties don't have a responsibility in this solution set, but just to say that we, at some point, probably in the not too distant future, we have to figure out how we do a better job of coordinating management up and down the watershed, and certainly with environmental justice in the forefront.
And I also think that counties are one of the most poorly funded tiers of government levels. So when you tell a county they have to deal with something, you know, actually, I do believe the state of California owes a bunch of money to the counties, which they never paid. Yeah, Debbie's laughing or smiling, so that must mean
Now I am.
you know, in the urban community, in the urban counties, we don't have a problem. Down here in Southern California, we don't have a problem. But I've just been listening to the Tuolumne County Utilities District talking about the fact that they have so many small systems built in the 1850s to 1900s, and they have no money to upgrade this infrastructure. The rural population doesn't have the economic base to pay for this, and so they've got real problems. So we might often think about disadvantaged communities being in the Central Valley, but they're also in other communities, as well as urban communities too.
There are definitely a lot of pockets in urban communities that have similar problems. It's ubiquitous and people haven't thought about it. I mean, I do think this is where I talk about tactical, using your tools tactically. And I think particularly on drinking water, the disadvantaged community advocates in the Central Valley in particular have been awesome at ringing the bell. So now it's much more common parlance, but then going to the legislature and getting the tools and the money that enable the state to be able to help some of them. But there's an even broader issue at that middle tier, because what you're talking about, Chris, is you've got communities that are using old flumes, from the mining era, that are lose 60% of their water to leakage, and the average is still, it's probably 20 to 30 in urban areas. It's much higher in others. And if we did a blitz of trying to button those up, put it in the next bond, because it's a capital thing, quite separately from subsidies, you could save a lot of water in a lot of places. But we don't really manage water holistically in the crisis. We did a lot of things to move that forward. But, you do have one of the questions, are there too many water agencies? The answer is yes. But the answer isn't that there should only be 5. There's something in between that gives you an economy of scale where folks can actually not have to duplicate effort on their treatment technology, their operators, their managers, et cetera. And I think that's where we're going to have to try and move. And it is getting to another question, is one of the things that keeps me up at night, which is that we don't have the capacity to actually manage this precious to life resource, even in just the drinking water arena and the local economy arena, that we really need to have. In some places, it's just because of circumstance and we ought to be helping. And in some places, it's because we have too many people not minding their own store. And there's got to be a better way to deal with something that's that important. Again, I'm not arguing for greater state control over everything like they have in virtually every other state, but something between where we are and that would enable a lot more people to be able to have access to clean, safe, and affordable water faster.
Felicia, it's interesting you talk about the flumes and hardening those. This is where, again, I feel like we have to figure out what you said earlier, how to think differently, because the leakage in those flumes is actually become part of the ecosystem.
True. Right.
So having spent time up there and talked through with residents what that would mean for what's going on around them, there's the potential it would have an impact on the forest, which is already being impacted by drought. And so that it's a more complicated issue. And
absolutely
want to make it sure that no one leaves this thinking that those folks up there are not thinking strategically and doing everything that they can. In fact, Tuolumne is one of my drought poster children, because we declared drought in January, and by January 15th, or I can't actually, I probably have the dates wrong now, but within weeks of the state declaring drought, Tuolumne County was on the phone saying that they had already issued mandatory 50% water rationing. And if 5 things didn't happen right, they were going to be out of water. And this is a community that has the Tuolumne River flowing through it, but they have virtually no surface water rates. And so,
Yep.
so this is one of those really excellent examples to me. I don't know what the solution set is, but I do know that through my eyes, there's an inequity there somewhere that we have to figure out how to fix. And partly too, because the health of that watershed is not just important to them, they are the frontline stewards of that watershed, but it's important to everyone who comes, you know, who follows them down the stream. So I think it's a great example, and also again, it helps to illustrate our need to figure out how we better view the interconnectivity. And again, to me, that's where the solution set is that gets us toward adaptation and toward mitigation. And I do just want to take a minute to talk about the forest piece, because partly because it's the work I'm doing right now, but also partly because I have the unique vantage point of having come up in the water sector, and now I'm working in the forest sector. And so I see that intersection really clearly. And I just want to tell one quick anecdote. So when I go out to the forest, or when I used to go out to the forest before COVID, and I stand with a group of people very proud of the forest thinning project they've just completed, I cannot tell you how often I ask a question that boggles everyone's mind. So great, the trees look fabulous, but what about the land? What about the dirt? what about the mine tailings that are right over there? And what about, I'm sure in this landscape I can't see it, but I'm sure there are springs that are clogged. What if we want the forest to be the sponge it was designed to be? There's a whole set of activities that have to happen in that space. And again, as we lose snowpack because of climate change, the sponginess of the forest is going to be one mitigating opportunity. But that's not going to happen if we leave things in the silos they're in. That's going to happen if we figure out how to reconnect the dots, and we make sure that when people are out there doing forest restoration, that they're doing the full system restoration and not just the trees. I mean, it's super important. We need to do the trees, don't get me wrong. But I think it's exactly where you started, Felicia. We just have to change how we think about these things.
That's great. And it's also, you know, everything it depends. So you could take those flumes and figure out how to button them up a bit without making them airtight. I mean, the way to, just having a leaky system willy-nilly isn't the way to do it, but they don't have the money to do a tailored system, right? They probably have the money to do occasional Band-Aids. And I love your point about the people all along the Tuolumne below, particularly the senior water rights holders, oh yes, in the Bay Area, don't realize that those people who are the folks in the watershed don't have the senior water rights. It's San Francisco that has the senior water rights, or in the in other others. I think it's something where if we had ownership, if people actually understood what their real watershed was and had ownership, this is almost, you know, taking Elizabeth's thing but blowing it up even more in a sort of a specific way. Folks would realize that we're all interconnected, and you know, we're all part of. It's like, I mean, think about the drought, how we got a lot done, where people responded so well to the governors, we're all in this together. I mean, I think regular people want to be a part of something bigger, but people balkanize the information and their management world in order to make it seem simpler. I'm sorry, Chris, you were going to say something. It's harder when we can't see you, so we should just all defer to the black box over there.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
You know, I was just going to say, you know, the interesting thing about Tuolumne County is they are home to millions of acre feet of water reservoirs, like Don Pedro, the San Francisco PUC, millions, multi-millions of acre feet that they have no right to at all. And that is reservoirs that take up space in their county, don't pay those, you know, the same amount of fees. And again, we go back to the counties being such a cash-strapped thing. And the people that live in Tuolumne are really dependent on Like they have one reservoir and they have groundwater. They have one reservoir. It has no carryover storage. It fills up, and they call it the end of spill date. When does that reservoir stop spilling? And then when it stops spilling, that's the water that they have for the rest until the next rains come. And yet they're home to all these millions of acre feet of reservoir space for other people, for other
Yeah,
communities.
it's
The Bay
true.
Area being one of them.
Right. And
You
the
know.
Turlock Modesto Irrigation District, there's an overlap. Clearly, you have people within the county, but people don't think beyond the big irrigation district, right? In terms of the people who live in that upper
Right.
watershed and care for it. It's interesting because we have more of a sense. I mean, speaking as a Southern Californian, I think we have more of a sense, some of us, we have 7 states on the Colorado, and because they're states that have, a role in a big agreement, and the upper watershed, even though Imperial at the bottom is the most senior on the river, you've got 7 states, so you've got to pay attention to the upper and the lower river. You can't just roll a state, whereas within one state you can have different classes of folks. And it's not that anybody set it up that way, it's just that we don't have a system that was created as a system. We have practices and things that have accreted over time. So figuring out how
What
to
is
have a
what
sophisticated is important.
what is that saying? It's better to be upstream with a shovel than downstream with a decree.
That's true, except I'm not so sure that's true on the Colorado, frankly. But
Yeah, I know. The Imperial Valley, 1/5 of the flow of the Colorado River goes to the Imperial Valley, not in not Southern California, not any of those other 6 states, but to the Imperial Valley. It's an incredible amount of water.
no, it's
And
amazing,
someone asked us about the Salton Sea,
right?
so it's like that's sort of the thing. Uh, the Imperial Valley at one point admitted that 1/3 of the water that came off, that went onto their farm fields, went into the Salton Sea. 1/3 of the water. So all these other states, oh, guess what? They didn't like that. And this is the hard part about the Salton Sea. Someone asked, what do you do about the Salton Sea? I do not know. It's quite a conundrum. It's a really difficult situation. If you stop putting water into the Salton Sea, then we're going to have dust storms, and we're talking about an area where the population has some of the highest asthma rates in California. We want to talk about environmental justice, but the Colorado River water is very tight, and it's hard for other states to go, oh yeah, just let that water flow in there. And so there's been all sorts of things, the QSA and San Diego getting the water, but the people in the Imperial Valley are very strongly set that they're not going to give away any more water.
Right.
So it's really a difficult situation. And if we stopped irrigating the Imperial Valley altogether, there would be a huge land use problem, not only to mention the Salton Sea. And some people say, well, let that water go down to the Colorado Delta, but who's to say it would actually ever reach there? Because other people would say, oh, you're not taking that water? We'll take it. We can do something with it. So it's a really tough situation. The birds really depend on the Salton Sea, and they depend on it more because the Colorado Delta is not there.
Right.
And I don't know. I don't have an answer. I wish I did.
Well, it's a hard one. I think that the answer, to the extent there is one, and one of the most difficult public policy problems out there, is to invest in figuring out how to restore a viable habitat. But you've got to add money, and you've got to add it fast, and you've got to do innovative projects and create wetlands and actually do things. I think there wasn't enough thought given to the Salton Sea in the QSA in terms of what happened at 15 years. But I'm biased there because it ended up in the water board's lap, and I couldn't believe that a previous water board agreed to something where there were no check-ins and no milestones for 15 years and then a cliff. So my fervent hope and wishes that Resources Agency in particular, and Wade Crowfoot, the secretary, seems to care about this issue very much, and they've actually stepped in to accelerate things, that they can be successful. But that's an issue I've worked on off and on over the years, and it's very difficult. And frankly, if Imperial Irrigation District, as Chris said, hadn't held firm, the sea would be in much worse shape. And in my conversations with the water officials in the other states, they know that the Salton Sea has got to be dealt with and can't be wiped off the map, and that it's important. And that's at least in part, if not large measure, because they know Imperial won't let it go. So that the fact that the peace was created between the Imperial Irrigation District and the county was actually one of the better things that happened in the last 5 or 6 years.
So I don't want to lose track. I love that somebody asked about geomagnetic flyover data. So
oh yeah, that's a good one, actually.
I want to answer that question because the answer is yes. This, I don't know, for folks who haven't seen the results, the interpretation of geomagnetic flyover data, it is amazing. It gives you a contiguous picture of the underground architecture. It's not foolproof, to be clear, but a whole bunch of work has already been done in the state in a series of pilots to refine the methodology so that we can understand the soil types. Because right now, most folks are using test wells and other well log information that's also not perfect to try to understand what the underground architecture is like. The awesome example I know about is on the Marin Peninsula. They were trying to figure out how to manage saltwater intrusion, and they made all these assumptions based on the test wells that they had, and then they did the I can't say the words right. Anyway, I'll just anyway, I'm going to stick with geomagnetic flyover, but there's there's another word there that I can't say. We did the flyovers and looked at the data and actually realized that how they were going to structure their I'm sorry, folks. I've been up since 4:30 this morning, so
Wow.
we're not being able to pull the right words out of my hat. But the wells, the buffer wells, that also have a name that I can't think of. How they were going to structure them was actually going to end up sucking more saline water in as opposed to buffering against it. And so the data that they received from this process was transformational and practically saved them from a lot of conflict down the road. And it's being used already in the Central Valley. Butte County has done a pilot, so has the Rosedale Rio Bravo irrigation. So if you haven't seen an example, you should check it out. It really is transformational. And best news yet, even under these budget conditions, the Department of Water Resources has signed a contract to do statewide flyover.
Yeah, I want to, since we're running short of time, I want to make sure there's some very good questions in the queue, and I want to thank people for sending them. And hopefully for some of you, we're not just talking in the middle of an issue. But after a day of panels, we also thought that just going straight to the questions might be a welcome relief. And hopefully you've started your cocktail party at home with us. I mean, I would hope you should. And next year, Dennis, I expect you to have a Palooza teeny recipe that everybody can make and have the same cocktail if they wish together at the end of the day. That's
next year we might actually want to do it in person.
Well, that's true. Well, maybe you can try doing it tomorrow. But
I mean, last year we did have we had Seltzer Sisters Seltzer and Italian sodas. But a Palooza teeny.
Oh, I remember that actually.
Yeah, sure.
But let's think about what it is liquid. We should talk about though at the end of the day. And so I'm sort of curious if there are things that people want to address. I'm happy to address any.
How about the last question, Eric Rosenblum?
I think it's a good one, actually.
That segues into what you're talking about.
Great. So Eric I'll read the question, says, nothing seems to fracture California into competing regions, then talk about whose water goes where. If habitat restoration requires a coordinated commitment, how do we develop a statewide sense of the common good? And that's a question I love, because that gets to like what keeps me up at night mostly. And what one thing, and I think that we have a fractured, we don't have, and it's not a critique, we don't have a lot of water literacy about how interconnected we all are, or a sense that even under our Constitution and public trust, and the waters of the state belong to the state, not as an entity that can say mine, but as a holder of this public good for all of us. And our public policy and discourse make it very difficult to look at water that way, and for folks to see the common connection. But if we were to do a blitz, I mean, I've long said we should be doing a blitz on the habitat restoration, and Debbie is the best at this, up the regions and working with people on the ground and create a whole new sense of ownership of these watersheds. And because of the nature of the way California is plumbed, irregardless of the water rights issue, these watersheds, the entire Sierra on both sides, are all of our watersheds. It's where a huge chunk of the water comes from, and that gives us, I think, a sense of ownership and responsibility for protecting them in our own interest, but also in responsibility to the other Californians, which is why the drought, as horrible as it was, had some real moments of people bringing out their better angels and an ability to think about how do we make water more plentiful for people, the environment, agriculture, all the things we rely on. We eat our water footprints are our lawns, which I wish people would get over, but also, the food we eat. And so the fact that things get down to sound bites, it's not an almond versus a fish. It's all of us figuring out how do we restore watersheds, the way Debbie has said, in a way that does more good for all. And you're seeing it in the urban context, and you're seeing it in some regions. And I think if we could have enough leadership to do that, and messaging about it, and people understanding their ownership, they would. Because if you look at, for example, Mono Lake, which is one of the questions, that's one of the most amazing success stories. Sure, there was litigation and law, but the city of LA had people, the Mono Lake Committee in particular, and their colleagues in the environmental movement, who turned LA around to make it possible to make that deal happen. And that was people who will never go to Mono Lake. And yet there's all the polls show a strong sense of ownership in that watershed and a desire to make it right. And I think if we really focused on that, we could do a lot of good for a lot of people and a lot of critters.
And you know what? I also think that we as water users, we don't pay for habitat restoration. We pay for the cost of the delivery of that water to ourselves, but especially down here in Southern California, well, we don't pay for the impacts of where we take the water from. At least not, I don't think, in a holistic way. And so I think people need to understand that, the fact that we can live in these cities the way we do is because we have built these huge infrastructure systems, but they have impacts, and we need to go back and we need to address these impacts.
Right, the whole externality of the project.
Yeah, I mean, I live in Santa Clarita down in Southern California, and our water bill is rarely above $75, and my water comes half from groundwater here and half from the State Water Project, which is flung over the Tehachapi's in the largest water lift in the world. And I pay $75. Now, I go up to Reno, in Reno, Nevada, where my parents live. Their water, they get out of the Truckee River that flows down through town and through groundwater, and they routinely have water bills up over $125 a month. Now, how can that be? Theirs comes, by Mother Nature, and mine comes from a huge lift, tossing it over the Tehachapi's, and I pay less. I mean, there's something, I think that shows something. And when you drive up in Reno, you will see a lot of people with really low water use landscapes because they don't want to pay those prices, so it works. Not a lot of grass up there, Felicia, you'd like it.
And actually, Chris, that you just touched on where I think the solution set lies. You bring large landowners to the table. because they are the managers that will be your partners in implementing the ecosystem restoration projects. And frankly, you can even bring folks as small as neighborhood scale together. And there's a great example going on on the Ventura River. There is, and it started, well, it didn't start, but one of the kickoff moments of the effort is the largest water user, an inn at the top of the watershed, was convinced that if they made changes on their landscape, they could reduce their consumptive water use by 80%. And they made the public commitment to do that. And that was sort of a leveraging point that brought a bunch of other parcel owners together. And they've got menus of things they can do on their property that both provide ecosystem benefits, and also they're dedicating their saved water to in-stream flow for the river, which also has an additive ecosystem benefit. And I'll tell you, the truth of the story is that the water districts were not the first ones at the table. It was the landowners. But now all of the water agencies on the river system are at the table. So to me, a big piece of this is resetting the table. If we just keep talking to the same people over and over, we're probably going to have the same outcomes. But if we can figure out who else has a value set here that can be served and bring them to the table, then all of a sudden we change the conversation.
I think that's really well said. I think one of the biggest problems in California water, once you step back from a local or real area, is that it's almost like the talking point projector machines come into gear, and people keep just sticking to their talking points, sometimes believing them because they've said them so often. I mean, sort of gets to Carol's question. There's no question that all of our urban areas could save a lot of water, since over 50% is used outdoors, not in the city of San Francisco, but certainly in the city of San Francisco's service area, where you do have marinas. There are legal agreements, there are different things that have to be dealt with, but we could be far more efficient with our water use in the urban context. We could recycle more, as some really good presentations earlier. We could capture stormwater. I mean, we'd just be way more efficient with our water use, and that's true to everybody in the system. But there, people instead just keep talking past each other. And I think the blessed are the conveners. I think about the folks that Debbie's talking about who pulled those people together. If we really did that in a very deliberative way around the state, and we also communicated about the connection we all have, I think we could actually make a lot of progress. But it requires a will to break the traditional dialogue and norms in California water. And I think the reason to do it in the drought, we did it because we were in a clear emergency. As Debbie was saying, we are in that emergency of climate change, and we can see the freight train of pain coming at us now, but it's just going to be worse in 10 or 20 or 30, 40 years between sea level rise and all the different things and the loss of snowpack. So we really need a Manhattan Project to galvanize ourselves to deal with water intelligently, and we can end up making a better set of communities and use new technologies and all of that. I mean, I think an intelligent, relatively small investment for the value could really work a great service. And the data, whether it's the flyovers or the data and the technology to be able to do the groundwater assessments, is one piece of a revolution in data and technology that's out there that we could take advantage of. But it will take leadership, I think, at the state level to be able to do it.
What about the federal level? Apparently there's going to be a new sheriff in town.
Well, I think the same things hold true, but it's a little different. And then I'll defer to my colleagues. I think on the technology dispersion front, on the risk front, I mean, EPA, others, there's a great history periodically of that happening. In the Clinton administration, which I got to be a part of, we were all over the place on clean tech, and a lot of the stuff that's grown in the energy and renewables sphere was something that the federal government affirmatively helped seed, not just through grants to solar companies, although that was there, but through just encouraging data technology and new technologies. And I think there's a need to do a lot more of it. I mean, I've said that you have the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency's ARPA that's, credited with a lot of things. In the Obama administration, they created ARPA-E, and the gentleman who ran it is one of the people rumored to be on the short list for Department of Energy. We should have an ARPA-W, or give it a better name, and try to disperse water technologies and data that can help make all of this cheaper and easier to do. But the federal government should play the role of a supporter and convener when dealing with state water issues. So it's a little bit that, like, be tougher on water quality issues, which we need them to set the standards and do the science. Then we need them to be the arbiters on science for the ecosystem and the underrepresented, and step up their role on science. And then, you know, figure out how to create opportunities where people have to come together and solve problems. I mean, in California, we haven't really made big leaps, and even then they weren't big enough, except when the federal government was sort of leaning over our shoulder. So there's a need for engagement, and hopefully we'll see it rather than just ignoring it. Debbie and Chris, you?
And partnership too, because
Yeah.
the federal government controls 57% of our upper watersheds in the state. That's pretty substantial. And they control just a little bit of our water too. So I'm optimistic about new opportunities for better partnerships that are self-reinforcing of the values we hold in California.
Agreed.
Any other? There's a legacy of questions now. This is a really long chat thing.
You'll send this to us somehow so that we can
Yeah,
answer
to
some of
see
them?
about saving it. Yeah, I mean, there is a text file that's created that I
Great.
will be looking at with interest. There's a couple questions. Julia Schmidt had a question that I kind of screwed up because it was in the Q&A and I transferred it over, and it got mixed up with a misspelled forest floors vacuuming question in that 57% area.
I just saw
But
one. That's
would it be possible to change the water rate structures and allow more need-based pricing for municipal water and sewer services?
you know,
That's a
kind of
term
like
I
they
hadn't
did
heard
in
before.
Philadelphia.
Need-based pricing.
Prop
They
280.
do it in Philadelphia. I mean, we can't do it that way. There are other ways to do it, but Philadelphia did it. Others are considering it, but yeah, we've tied our own hands in this state. But it's you have to do it in different ways. I think the way that people have talked about doing it that makes the most sense is there are a number of agencies who've done the tough work of justifying their rate structures, and they have a basic block which gives you, you know, a reasonable amount for your indoor use and even a reasonable amount for your outdoor use, and everybody gets that rate, so you're not doing favorites. And then if
A
people
tier.
use a lot more, they pay through the nose. Is that an oversimplification, Debbie?
Well, no, I mean basically a tier structure, you know.
Where's
Yeah.
need them? Yeah, I think, I mean, the big thing is Prop 218. It's something that in the water, I mean, there's alignment across a number of spaces and sectors to find a pathway through that. It's just how to get the voters to vote on it. And I raise this because first off, I think we need to figure it out. But second off, the pathway has to be educating our ratepayers who are also our, you know, community members. And I do think there's higher value in doing that. That gets us Prop 218, but probably also gets us a bunch of other things, because practically every person is a water manager. And so, you know, I love the groups like what's the group in Petaluma, Daily Acts. They actually can calculate how much water they've saved across the hundreds of gray water systems and rainwater barrels, et cetera, that they've worked with communities to install.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of engagement and activity is, to me, the pathway that gets us to the answer to this question, and I think gets us eventually to revising Prop 218 to allow better, because really what you're describing, Felicia, is great, but it doesn't get you the low income assistance program that you need for the folks who can't even afford the base rate. And that's because of that.
No, that's right. You have to do that too. That's a fair point.
Requirement. It's a good question.
Really good question.
I have No idea where we are on time. Poor
I,
Richa, who's been our timer, has left, and
oh no, my buzzer went off. We've
that
done
was
our
your
40
buzzer.
minutes. That was my buzzer. We've done our 40
Yes,
minutes. And then
our
that's why I
crack
was trying to turn
timer.
it to a closing question, but then you asked another couple questions and,
I know there was a whole bunch.
but
Uh, I mean, Carol Steinfeld had a question on basically, well, really that boils down to almost the voluntary agreement kind of question and lawsuits and things, as
yeah,
well.
that's a big question. There's a lot
Yeah,
there. I think those
and
lawsuits are unfortunate and um, misguided, but I think there's a lot more the Bay Area could do to care about the fish in the watershed that they're taking their water from. And I think if people in the Bay Area understood that, they'd want that too. And then you invest in the other things, which will cost something to diversify your water supply and conserve. But I don't think there's general understanding of the tremendous impact that the Bay Area has on the watersheds it gets its water from, which are not their watersheds either. I mean, the Bay Area is just as dependent on imported sources, if not a little bit more than Southern California. Some of them are more scenic water,
Yeah,
right? But it's and the total volume down south in agriculture is bigger, but we're not all blameless there. And so if everybody did their part versus fighting for every drop, we'd be in much better shape.
yeah, there's a lot of focus on the Delta tunnels, but there's
Yeah,
the
tons of
Hetch Aqueduct and the McCollum Aqueduct, and there's all the water that's taken out and diverted into Sacramento Valley as well that would have flown into the Delta if it
right,
hadn't been diverted there. So,
right.
you know, I think it's my impression living in Southern California that there's a lot of people that like to shake their fist at Southern California, but and while we're not perfect, nobody's hands are clean. Nobody's hands are unwashed. Everyone has Delta water on their hands.
There you go.
and there was a question, actually, Chris, there was a question, how can you invest in water's future? I saw this on Maven's
I don't
notebook, so
know,
I thought I'd ask. Oh, I'm sure I
yeah,
saw.
I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one. Oh, it says my network bandwidth is low. I don't know. That's a good question. They're trying to find new vehicles there's a new initiative out there trying to find market-based, vehicles to get people to invest in water infrastructure. Economies of scale are a big thing. And so, if you can get some small utilities that kind of need the same thing done to group together to get one big contract to get it done, it can mean savings for everybody. So, you have to be innovative and look for those economies of scale if you're in a small rural environment where you can.
Well, I actually have another screen and a browser up with that was on Maven's notebook, and it talked about the Netflix of water.
Well,
And that
yeah.
actually, how the question, how you invest in water's future, I saw right on there.
Oh, well, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't understand you were
You're
handing
not
me a plug.
internalizing your own copywriting.
You can invest by donating to Maven's Notebook. I am totally, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. I'm a
All
little
right.
dense, but
Now I'm
yes.
following you.
I threw a huge softball.
And I missed
Yeah.
it, like airplane joke. But yeah, I am supported by my readers and my sponsors. So, shout out to Valley Water. They're one of my sponsors, and a shout out to all of you in the Bay Area that donate to my project. It's tax deductible. So, if you can, this is a tough year. So, if you can, donate, that's great. You'll get a handwritten card from me. That's how dismal I guess my donations are. I can still do it by hand. So.
Yes, you were saying you were doing that today. Actually, here's tomorrow. we have a lineup. I don't know if you looked at it, but there. I'll throw this one out, and it won't be necessarily a softball, but tomorrow we have the Steve Ritchie interview, and then followed by Mike Marcus,
Yeah,
and preceded, both of those guys preceded by Darren Polimas. So
great people.
anybody have any particular questions? I mean, I just saw where aren't, I mean, one question I had with Mike Marcus, and I know he has a presentation and, is rightfully talking about groundwater recharge and, the water reuse structure that they've been doing for so long. But I meant to ask him about, all those wells that had to be decommissioned and, with the PFAS stuff. And I just
That's what I'd
saw
suggest you ask them about.
breaking news about a
Yeah.
big lawsuit.
Right.
They want some blood.
Yeah, no, I think it's worth asking him. I was going to send that question into you, the earlier panel, which is how are they looking at it and what treatment technologies are they favoring and how can you, allay the public? I mean, I think water treatment's just going to get more expensive the more we find and the different treatment trains we have to add. And so it gets back to this information kind of desert that we have, except for Chris, I think, who does an amazing service. I mean, really, if you guys don't follow it, you should, because it's like you can be in so many places you can never be. And she summarizes talks in the most beautiful and efficient way. She actually punctuates me when she writes what I say, which is I always really appreciate. But it's really clear and really a great service. But I think if people really understood what went in to giving them that incredible elixir out the tap when it's good, they would support it. But we do have to figure out the issue of how do you deal with the people who just can't afford it, but who tend to be the people who appreciate it the most.
I put a link up, by the way, for California CA Water 101, which is on the Mavens resource page, and that is I could see people putting people in, just that have a class,
Yeah, actually,
assign them to
college
that.
courses, it is required reading for some college courses,
It
believe
should
it or
be.
not,
Yeah.
Yep.
So anyway, just a little shout out there. There's in the chat. There's a link to it as well. But any other thoughts about questions? I mean, so I definitely want Mike Marcus to, address the break kind of the state of the news. I know their lab has been working overtime on that kind of stuff. So
Yep, I think that sounds great. And you
think
should
we-
ask Darren what keeps him up at night. I mean, that guy's got a lot on his plate. I mean, he's there because he's run every department other than water rights. He's sort of the utility competent, get her done player in the state board, which is why we gave him drinking water. And so he's a can-do kind of a guy. So I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, mostly, well, I think he's going to be talking about SB 966 implementation, which is always a big SSV issue.
Yeah, sure.
But also, the rules in terms of the chemicals of convenience, the Teflon and all the, the
Oh,
PFAS and PFOA stuff that sidelined those wells in Orange County, and and the testing requirements and things, going through the water board. I guess because in their strategic plan, their 2021 strategic plan, they have pretty aggressive. It's a big year. I mean, there's a lot on their plate just with those two things, but there's more. Certainly.
Oh, yeah. It's moving the water board to the drinking water program to the water board was a brilliant thing. Thank you, Debbie, and all the people that worked on that, because it makes a more holistic view of water, and I think there's a lot to be done, but it's raising the profile of water in a way where it immediately became a big part of a smaller institution, and where it became the top priority overnight because it's human health and well-being. So I'm a little worried about your folks dropping off. So
Yeah,
enough, I don't
we are
enjoy this
doing that.
conversation, but
Yes, we are getting into that, actually getting past that time, but um, the three of you, I was really looking forward. I mean, as an energy boost at the end of the day, and there's a ton of questions here. Steve Jordan was asking about um, suggestions in lieu of litigation over Bay Delta.
well, engage and give up some drops for fish and others. I mean, that it's sort of,
Collaborate.
yeah, you can always do it, but don't say do an agreement that ices out key stakeholders and parties. I mean, I think there is a way to resolve it, but and I'm not anti-litigation. I think litigation is the only thing that sort of saved the ecosystem over time, and everybody has a right to do it. But I think good faith, figuring out how to be a part of this continuum we were talking about from headwaters all the way down and as one group, it's more of an attitudinal thing. I mean, I don't expect people to give up water. It's a valuable resource. It's all in how you engage and in attitude. But again, when I was a lawyer, I advised my clients to settle most of their cases because that was actually in their interest and in the community's interest. And when I was in government, I did too, because I think you've got to figure out how to help everybody get better together. And I don't think there's any weakness in that. I think it's smart. I think there's a need for leadership to not just hand things to lawyers all the time, or to it always being a gaming kind of exercise. But there's a longer answer there that we don't have time for.
Well, I guess we'll have to, now, there was good feedback on the previous quote about every person a water manager.
Yeah, that was good.
But we'll have to end with give up some drops because it can
Yeah.
fit on a t-shirt pretty easily.
Yeah, if they say they
Bumper
can't,
sticker.
they can. We all can.
The new save mono, like, bumper sticker can be give up some drops.
Give up some drop.
Chris, especially since your laptop, does your laptop have any last thoughts?
No, it's been a lot of fun. I'm trying to think. There was a great question that was sent out here, and how would I answer it? Oh, what do you wish that most folks knew about California water? I would have to say that they understand where their water comes from. Number one, because in this state it comes from all over the place. So I think that's the first step. Is that's what I would like everyone to understand, and I guess that'll be my closing thought.
That reminds me of the old folk song about "And the hills turn brown in the summertime." There's no gold in California, and the hills turn brown in the summertime. Debbie, Franco, final thoughts.
Yeah, I'm going to borrow somebody else's words and say, be the change you want to see. I really think that I imagine people who are still here at 6:30 p.m. are the diehard folks who really want to be part of the future. And so that's that's my closing thought. And I think that up and comers in the water space we've got an amazing crowd of people, and so arms, we can do it together.
Yep.
Yes, everybody
Absolutely.
remaining gets the equivalent of the quad to candlestick. Felicia, Marcus, last word.
No, I agree. I love these people. Yeah, we're all in this together, and we just need to call on our better angels and not hand it off to others. I really think it's so within our grasp to make our water resources stretch further for people and the environment and everything, but we have to, folks need to know their watershed and need to understand, that they need to step up and act. And I know a lot of your listeners are people who show up, and I really am grateful for that.
So the takeaway is that the Sopranos are singing from the same songbook. Well, good.
Thanks very much.
Good night, everyone. We had various cocktail hours, and I think we'll have to have real ones instead of virtual. So bye for
Yes.
now, and thanks so much for agreeing to do this.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Oh,
Thank
a
you.
pleasure. And what's the best way to invest in the water future?
Donate to Maven's Notebook. Woo!
Yay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.